Well, I've managed to drag myself away from Baldur's Gate for just a little while, ready to embrace the cold mechanical march of the Necrons. So yes, we are back with another index tier list, ranking 5 of the units in the Necrons index, which, at least in my opinion, should be a very strong consideration for any competitive Necron army list in 10th edition. And as usual, this isn't going to be in any specific order of best to worst. It is just 5 units that I really like and that I think are doing really well in 10th edition at the moment. And so first up, we have one of the cheapest, most humble options available to the Necrons, and that is the lovable Trashcans themselves, the Crypto Thralls. These almost certainly soon to be nerfed models come in at a crazily cheap 40 points for 2 of them, and whilst they're not immediately terrifying, they sport a toughness 4 2 wound profile with a 3-up save. They are essentially Space Marines, and they have a rather mediocre 4 strength 5 minus 1 AP 1 damage attacks and a token bit of shooting from their eyes. There is much more to these walking bins than meets the eye, not to put too fine a point on their shooting attack. Not only do they have a 4-up Feel No Pain base, which is already a rather strong boost to their own durability, but they also grant a Cryptek model in the same unit as them that 4-up Feel No Pain 2, which already helps your squishier characters stay alive against precision shots, and then they also have a fight on death mechanic if they get killed in melee thanks to Systematic Vigor. However, the really crazy part for these guys is that they can join an infantry character that's leading a unit and become part of that bodyguard unit, and they have reanimation protocols. So you can essentially, for 40 points, add 2 toughness 4, 2 wound, 3-up save models with a 4-up Feel No Pain to, say, a squad of Necron warriors, and these 2 models can be reanimated with reanimation protocols. So rather than having to get through a toughness 4, 1 wound, 4-up save warrior before you start killing off models from the unit, your opponent now has to get through that much tankier 3-up save and 4-up Feel No Pain before any actual models in the unit, like the Necron Warriors or the Lich Guard or the Immortals, actually start dying. And of course, the Trashcans can get back up and do it all over again. So yes, they're not super killy by any stretch, although it is worth saying they can help out quite a lot to something like a Necron Warrior squad. If they get caught in melee, it adds a good amount of damage to something like a Necron Warrior squad for 40 points, but spending those 40 points just to essentially get 4 extra 3-up save wounds that have Feel No Pain and can keep reanimating to keep giving that 4-up Feel No Pain save before your actual squad starts taking damage on things like the Warriors is so worth it, and it is insanely good value. It's basically 10 points for a 3-up save, 4-up Feel No Pain wound that can keep getting back up, and I really can't think of any other examples in 40k where you can get such good value and such good durability for that 10 points. And so I just think they're worth taking in every list for the simple fact that they can endlessly frustrate your opponent over and over and over again as they try to kill off something like a squad of warriors or immortals, and just keep hitting these things, which are already quite hard to kill thanks to that 4-up Feel No Pain, but just keep getting back up as well. Next up, we have the Lich Guard, and these guys are already relatively durable and act as a fantastic bodyguard unit for your characters. They've got a hefty toughness 5, 2 wound, 3-up save profile, so they are relatively tanky. They're not amazing straight off the bat, but they are reasonably tanky, and they are only 19 points per model. They do of course have reanimation protocols, which makes them more durable as they can just keep getting back up again and again and again. And then whilst they don't have any ranged attacks in melee, they can bring a hyperphase sword and a dispersion shield for strength 6, minus 2 AP, 1 damage attacks, and a 4-up invuln, which of course makes them even more tanky and more difficult to get rid of. Or instead you can go for the more damage output method and take war scythes on them. And this gives each model 2 strength 8, minus 3 AP, 2 damage attacks with devastating wounds, which, let's be honest, is quite scary. A full squad of 10 of these will easily overkill a 10-man intercessor squad in one round of combat, and they can even be quite good against tougher targets like vehicles and monsters, thanks to the mortal wounds from devastating wounds. So whilst they can be pretty good in their damage output, of course their true value is as bodyguards, and this is where their Guardian Protocols rule really comes into its own. When they are joined by a noble unit, any enemy attack going into that unit is at -1 to wound. And what that means is that with their toughness 5, bolters will now be wounding your unit on 6s, heavy bolters will be wounding on 5s, and even things like las cannons or other big anti-tank stuff will be wounding you on 3s rather than 2s. So this is a huge boost to not only their durability, but of course any valuable HQs that are joining them. And if you want a unit that may be expensive but just will not die, 10 Dispersion Shield Lich Guard with a Noble and a Cryptech with some Crypto Thralls will just sit on an objective all game long, and by the end of it, you will probably still have every single model in that unit alive, no matter how much firepower the enemy has chucked into them. In the third spot, we have one of my favourite models, and that is one of the newer designs from 9th edition, which is the Locust Heavy Destroyer. This thing just chonks. I love him. He is a beefy fella, and at 45 points per model, they're actually reasonably durable for that cost. They have a toughness 6 3-up save profile with 4 wounds, so they can definitely take a bit of a beating, even from some heavier firepower, and with a solid 7-inch move as well, they can always quite easily hide out of line of sight in deployment, and then creep out that 7 inches to get a shot at an enemy in your movement phase. And then of course they work really well with reanimation protocols, bringing back a few wounds each battle round, which means that they really can ignore a lot of the small incidental light arms fire that might come their way. They will just be absolutely fine tanking that and then healing the wounds back up if they've taken 1 or 2 wounds. So they really will take a proper amount of heavy weapon investment for your opponent to actually kill. Their main role is long range firepower, and they can do it equally well against tanks or against infantry, depending on what weapon you take, especially with their optimized for slaughter rule. And it all depends on what gun you take. They either have the Gauss Destructor or the Enmitic Exterminator. The Gauss being your anti-tank, it's 1 shot at strength 14, -4 AP, flat 6 damage and lethal hits, whilst the Exterminator is rapid fire 6, sustained hits 1, and is 6 shots at strength 6, -1 AP, 1 damage. And it has a 36-inch range, so that's going to be 12 shots at 18 inches, exploding on 6s of course, and doing a good bit of work on enemy infantry. What the optimized for slaughter rule means is that when you have the Gauss, you are re-rolling wound rolls of 1 against monsters and vehicles, whilst if you have the Exterminator, you are re-rolling those wound rolls of 1 against infantry instead. So it is very reliable, and both guns are heavy, so it means that you will have great range. You will most likely be hitting on 2s if you don't move, and then you will probably be wounding your intended targets on 2s or 3s depending on what you take, re-rolling the 1s thanks to Optimize for Slaughter. So these guys can do a heck of a lot of work in whatever role you take them for, and a squad of 3 with Gauss runs you 135 points and actually has a really good chance of one-shotting something like a Gladiator Lancer. It on average does 11.6 wounds to a Lancer, and a Lancer has 12 wounds, so with a little bit of luck or maybe a command reroll, you can almost certainly net a relatively heavy enemy tank every single turn. They also, of course, look really cool, which is a big bonus too, but I just think in general, for 135 points getting you 12 toughness 6 3-up save wounds with reanimation protocols and some truly terrifying damage output, it is a really solid investment, and I do think it brings some genuinely good anti-tank or anti-infantry to a Necron list. In spot number 4, we have the old unloved sheep of the family, which nobody cared about at all in 9th edition, which is the Canoptech Reanimator. This sad little fella is now much better, and arguably one of the strongest buffing units in the entire index. He's actually not too badly priced at 95 points. He has toughness 6, 6 wounds and a 3-up save, but also has a base 4-up feel no pain, so he can actually survive a good bit longer than you might expect. And whilst his damage output is nothing exciting at all, he's got 3 shots at strength 6, -2 AP, 1 damage at 12 inches, and then 4 really rather pathetic strength 5 attacks in melee, but damage output is almost irrelevant for the Reanimator. What he does best is, as you might expect, reanimate things. His reanimation beam is now an aura, and whenever a Necron unit is within 12 inches of him, it gets an extra D3 wounds back when it reanimates. So that unit of Necron warriors standing near him, they now get D6 plus D3 wounds back, or 2d3 plus 3 near an objective, or that unit of Lich Guard, they now get 2d3 wounds back in your command phase. So it is a huge amount of extra wounds, extra bodies, and extra points essentially that you can be bringing back with this guy. And essentially every one of your command phases, the Reanimator will be able to bring back on average just under 25 points of warriors. So if you, for instance, had 2 squads of warriors near him, that could be an extra 50 points of warriors coming back every battle round, which really does add up over the course of a game. So he is, of course, going to be a big target for the enemy, but if he stays alive even for just a couple of turns, and you have a few squads around him, he can almost pay for himself before he dies just by bringing back a few extra wounds to all your nearby squads. So he is really good at helping you stay alive that little bit longer, and if nothing else, he is going to be a really good bullet magnet and distraction carnifex, because your opponent just won't want to shoot your squads of warriors or immortals or Lich Guard, because they are going to know you're going to be getting so many wounds and so many models back thanks to the Reanimator. The final unit I think any self-respecting competitive Necron list should have, or at least be considering, is one of the Cryptechs. And it's worth saying a lot of the Cryptechs are really good. They all bring some pretty solid buffs to your army and to your squads. They are all very good force multipliers. But for me, the best of the bunch is the Chronomancer. This is a toughness 4, 4 wound, 4 up armor save, 4 up invuln save model that can join units. So whilst he does on the face of it appear a bit squishy, he does have that added protection from joining a unit. And of course you can take Crypto Thralls with him for that sweet 4 up Feel No Pain as well. And then whilst on the output front he isn't that scary, he's got D6, Strength 5, -1 AP, 1 damage shots, at 18 inches with the Aeon Stave, and then the same profile but only 3 attacks in melee with it. But the real strength of the Chronomancer isn't his durability or his damage output, it is in the abilities he brings. And for a ridiculously cheap 50 points, he brings 2 very strong buffs that I would argue are almost worth that 50 point price tag, even if he only had one of them. The Chronomatron gives his unit after it's shot the ability to make a normal move of up to 5 inches, so with Necrons being a very slow army with a base 5-inch move, they are infamously slow to get around the board and get onto objectives and basically just have any board control. This essentially turns a squad of Necron warriors into a 10-inch move faster than Howling Banshees zooming squad of robots around the battlefield, which is really good for a Necron player to have. And I mean, you can't charge after this move, but for getting onto an objective or shooting and then retreating from an enemy melee unit that may be getting a bit too close, or just getting around the board a bit faster, this rule is absolutely brilliant for an army like the Necrons. And then on top of that rule, he also brings the Time Splinter Mantle, which gives him and his unit a -1 to be hit. Now, obviously, this is super powerful. It is against both ranged and melee, so this is going to help something like a squad of 20 warriors get up the board more effectively, hold an objective more effectively, or even if you are caught out of place and get charged, it will make a massive difference in keeping your models alive in melee too. So your units are going to be much faster with this guy, and much more durable as well. And I personally think both of those buffs are really great, especially for something like a big squad of 20 Necron warriors. And having them together almost makes the Chronomancer pretty much a must-take in my opinion, especially if you are bringing a big squad of Necron warriors or something like a squad of Lich Guard that you just want to be as speedy and as durable as possible, because speed and durability are 2 of the most important aspects of 40k, and having a model that can bring them both to a unit in very good ways for such a cheap price point is unbelievably good value, and I just think having a Chronomancer in your list all the time is well worth considering. So that is the Necrons. They are doing relatively well at the moment, I think, but of course they do have a load of other units that could have been in this list as well. Warriors themselves are just great, the Catan are all relatively solid, especially the Transcendent Catan, and a load of their HQs actually are just brilliant, with things like Overlords, Caesaras, and even all the other Cryptex, as I mentioned, all being very good picks. So this was a hard list to do, but what we've covered here are 5 units that I think if I was doing a Necron list, I would probably be bringing in most games in some capacity, or I would at least be considering, depending on how I was building my list. But of course, as always, I would love to know what you think of the Necrons Index and what units you would include if you were doing a list like this of your own. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me, but until next time, I'll catch you later, guys.